In the Lord of the Rings movies, we learned that gold is nice and pretty, and we should strive to acquire it by all means necessary. In the camera world, we also have a ring, and it's pretty good. It's called a Megadap, and I will be using this Zeiss lens soon on a Nikon body with a little ring. Who said rings were bad? Lord of the Rings got that one wrong, didn't they?
All I want is the perfect camera. All I want is the perfect camera.
Okay, we have a very interesting comparison episode today. We got the Megadap Pro adapter that actually works on Nikon bodies. We're going to do a couple little comparisons in here. I want to vlog with that 20mm on the Nikon body, and then wildlife 200 to 600. Will that sync stabe? And can I stack adapters with my Canon to Sony? So right now we're on the Sony a7S III, Zeiss Batis 25mm Tony 2, exposed with a light. There's definitely not a light here. You would see it if there was. There's not. Let's switch to the Nikon ZF with this exact lens, and let's see, we're in standard profile here. Let's go rich tone portrait. I realize you probably wanted to see the adapter and how small. It's so thin. Like when it's on your body, you don't even see it. It's like tiny, thin, lightweight. That's cool, because usually when you buy an E-mount lens, it's a steep cliff that never ends right. That's not what I meant. It's like a road that doesn't end. The one-way street to nothing else. Whereas you buy a Canon EF lens, that could be put on any body. Well, now your stupid E-mount glass can be put to use on a proper Nikon camera. Oh, why hello to you. Rich tone portrait now. Nikon body, same lens. Custom white balance for both. Side by side. There we now have the ultimate color comparison. Standard versus rich tone. I know I should have used standard here. I see it now, but whatever. We didn't. I'm not going to either. Take that to the bank. That was the autofocus. This is what people do, right? We'll see if it loses me outside or how that Sony somehow. I got animal eye detect. Oh boy. So far it feels like native performance without any downside, just because it's so thin you barely feel like you have it on there, except there's potentially one devastating deal-breaking flaw that I will test overnight, and I will post it in this video, but if that's the case, then I throw this thing in the trash. Let us talk about how this came into my possession on the Zeiss 55mm. Did you ever dream that you would see a combo like that? Nikon color science with Zeiss glass? Forget about it. Forget about the whole thing. So this funny story. Okay, so Steinbeck sends us the ZF, bunch of lenses, and then a week later he sends this Megadap that allows my Zeiss lenses on. I was super excited. I was in the middle of making a video, and then I was like, oh, it arrived. All right, let's switch to the Zeiss Batis. And it didn't work. It did not work. So apparently there's a proprietary USB clip that needs to be clipped to update the firmware, and without that, you cannot update it. So they probably had a fix, but I had no way of updating the firmware. So I reach out to their customer support saying that, like, I don't have this clip, like, do you sell one? I'll buy it. Cool, thank you. Like, how can I update the firmware otherwise? And they're like, it was the most annoying process, I gotta be honest with you. Because he was just like, what firmware is your ZF on? I'm like, the latest one. And it took like a week to get that email. And I was like, oh my God. And he asked me some other redundant question, like, do you have the Pro or the regular? I never mentioned Pro. I said it. ETZ21. So it was like taking like 2 weeks, and then I'm like, hello, last chance. And then he's like, sorry, we're just discussing it. And then he says, how about we send you the Pro version for free? Your camera Conspiracies. We love you. And I was like, oh, deal. Sign me up to that one. So now we have the Pro version that doesn't need that proprietary clip. And your Zeiss hood. So thank you, Megadap, for sending this to me for free. It's a sponsored shill video. And thank you, Steinbeck, for attempting to give this to me. And I hope that USB clip's being used right now on your blender or something, updating the firmware. Let us go outside and see if we can now vlog. Sony 20mm 1.8? Is the Stabe really better? Come on. Okay, we're on the Sony a7S III on the 20mm 1.8 in active Stabe. Just chilling. Little casual walk. We're gonna switch to the little Nikon that could, same lens. See if IBIS is good, and the digital, it's a bit more of a crop when you go in on the digital Stabe. Sony's just a 10%. And if I wanted to catalyst browse our way through life on a just 5% crop, I could do that to you, but it's not fair. Nikon has a 20mm 1.8, but it's much heavier. I can't see why you would ever want that. So like, this would be a superior solution if the Stabe's good, which I doubt it will be, but here we are walking. Let's switch to the Nikon and see what happens. Okay, we are on the Nikon ZF, same lens. No digital Stabe yet, just wanted to see what IBIS looks like. Trying to be careful here. It's not easy. Always the tripod, there's a little twist movement. It's tough, man. It's tough to get it right, but this is what IBIS looks like on Nikon 20mm. You can imagine what the 20mm Nikkor would look like. Slightly sharper maybe, but your arm would melt. But that's actually been the biggest disappointment of the Nikon system, because from afar, every YouTube shill always said like Nikon IBIS is so good, but they're only talking about telephoto, man, not for vlogging. That's a whole different algorithm for another day. So Nikon, you not the favorite over here. So hopefully exposure is good. Nikon's very good at face exposure. Let's turn digital Stabe on and see how much of a crop that handles. That's not a sentence. Ouch. See, I forget what the crop factor is, but it's pretty huge. It's something like 25%. I did the calculations and said it in another video. You should have watched them all and remembered, but that's the thing. Like, Sony's about a 10%. Most of the companies have a 10% and then an extra one that's either like 30 or 45. And Nikon only has the huge in the middle 25. What the hell was that noise? Fix your car, you hobo bitch. This car was farting. So in theory, you now have a Nikon vlogging system, decent light lens, no 3D pop whatsoever, but Nikon color science and exposure that's like really good for the face. No matter what, it's like it brightens it. And it's very smooth, the changes. Not bad. We're both in 5600 kelvins. I'm gonna run across this street dangerously. How did I get on this side, you ask? That's a story for another day. This day, like right now. I saw a bunny, so bunny-like. I was in HD 120 at first. I was like, oh no, punch in 4K 60 with the huge crop. Stabe, not the best. It's worse than Sony Stabe with this lens, but whatever. I got some okay moments. I was inching closer and closer to him. He's a little baby bunny. Oh goodness, how do you keep your heart from melting? So cinematic. Down in the leaves. This was like resting on the ground, still kind of shaky. I was like, come on, how do you get a tripod in here? And the money shot was achieved. 4K 60, nose twitching, on the grass, ton in the background. Sharp, it's decent. I mean, obviously the Nikkor 180 to 600 would be superior to this because it wouldn't have all these jerky swaying motions, but you could use this if you got a tripod, Mr. Freak. Little HD 120 action here. This was animal eye detect. I had a little box on that bird. It was detecting him. So like in this situation where there's nothing covering the bird, like yeah, it'll probably work, but if there's twigs and he's hiding, not the most reliable thing. But it was very sharp and good. It's just the stabe is kind of unusable. It's cool that you can use it though, adapting a Sony lens to Nikon. The coolest moment was the double woodpecker team. They were swaying in the wind, just pecking away, having fun together. It's too bad the stabe is unusable, but if you DaVinci resolve it, maybe you'll have a chance. But yeah, it's quite the difference. It gives you a taste of the Z6 III because you have this crop in the highest, like this would be 4K 120 with the crop, and then you switch into HD 240, which would be slower, but no, only 5% crop. I don't know. It's okay. Hey, it's doing it. We are on the Canon EF 85mm 1.2 adapted to the 7 Artisans to E-mount adapter adapted to the Megadap E-mount to Z adapter. So it does totally work. The funny thing is this does no longer work on my actual Sony. It's autofocusing. Eventually. Not bad. So I've had a chance to look at the footage. What I've noticed is, if you're here on a tripod, fantastic little adapter. You can use your Zeiss glass or Sony G Master stuff on a Nikon. It makes sense. It's a lot cheaper than switching systems entirely. However, if you're going outside, I don't know if it's just Nikon or what, but the stabe is not good at all. If it's just IBIS with the 20 that has no stabe, it didn't look great. Blame that on Nikon, I think. If you had just like a 50mm prime and you're just hand holding, it'll probably be stable enough. But when you turn digital stabe on, just things got haywire and very bad. And also with the Sony 200 to 600, it was way worse than the Sony. So it's like, obviously the OIS and IBIS do not sync together, and that's the problem with third parties. It never works. That's why like native is always your best option. But if you have a bunch of Sony glass that you love, the Zeiss stuff, and you're curious, Nikon has a feature that you need that Sony doesn't have, 6K 60 RAW and the Z6 III, but you have your Zeiss glass, okay, you get this adapter, it'll do ya. But like if you're just starting out, native always. Unless you're adapting manual focus, old stuff, vintage touch. Now the one potentially deal-breaking flaw, I have heard that if you leave this adapter on your camera, even though you turn it off, you go to bed, you wake up, that battery is drained. Is that true? So I don't even know the answer yet. If that's true, I would have a hard time recommending this thing. It's kind of cool that I can use my Zeiss lenses, but it looks just as good on the Sony. And then like if you actually had to remove it every time at night and then find another lens to put on or a body cap, it's like, it ain't worth the hassle for me. So thank you Megadap for sending it. It has its pros and cons. Pros, Canon EF, huh? 85mm. Wow. Autofocusing, that's crazy. And good. Eventually. I'll leave. How you doing? You donating Bitcoin? You're not. You subscribing? You haven't. You weren't planning to. Subscribe for more, not anything?